Here to discuss the technological shifts in quantum computing, please welcome the Chair and CEO of IBM, Arvind Krishna, with Atlantic staff writer Josh Tyrangiel.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
We're going to throw you right into the deep end. Everyone in this audience has a completely fluent understanding of quantum computing. They have not been faking it every time they see it mentioned in the last 3 to 5 years. We know what we're talking about, but what we want to know is, do you know what you're talking about? So why don't we start at a very basic place? And many have tried, many have failed, but give us the thing that's going to stick with us. How do we understand what quantum computing is? And then we're going to get a little into the ramifications of it, how we use it. But if you could just start there, that would be great.
So I'm going to start with 30 seconds of a little bit of science and then go into some use cases which I think will really bring quantum home to you. So let's start with normal computers. What do? They do high school algebra, albeit on steroids. It's high school algebra. Think about the algebra that many of you have ignored, some of you probably live with, simple calculations, what you think of as simple equations, those things done on steroids. But there is a lot more mathematics than that. There are these things that people use to compute what is the energy state of an atom. How do two atoms combine to form molecules? Otherwise, quantum mechanics. The mathematics of quantum mechanics is really outside what today's computers can do, but that is what quantum computers do. That was the science, and I'll stop with the science. So why does it matter? Take the caffeine molecule. I admit I'm a coffee addict. Some of you are, many of you may not be. Others are Coke, some others are tea. We know what the caffeine molecule is. 160 electrons, we know what it is. We have no idea why it does what it does. That is what a quantum computer will be able to do, because it'll be able to compute what are the properties of that molecule. Now, okay, caffeine, got it, interesting, where's the money? How about fertilizers? How about fertilizers? That's a bit of money. 3% of the world's electricity is used to make fertilizers. It can be used to make better food. We know that nature can do what fertilizers do with these really simple bacteria in the soil, but we have no idea how they work. Could we figure out by sequencing and a quantum computer how those bacteria work, in which case the cost of fertilizers comes way down and food production goes way up? Or a lithium hydride. Again, a pretty simple molecule, but we have no idea why it causes explosions when it's in certain electrolytes. We have no idea why it causes heat. If we can figure those things out, make better batteries. And then the whole world of finance. Today, often the way risk works, you do some big computation overnight. Yep, it's called a Monte Carlo simulation, but it's overnight. And then you use that during the day. That means all the other conditions during the day are not in it. Could a quantum computer be able to do that in a few milliseconds, in which case, much better pricing and much better financial instruments. So sort of bridging a little bit from the science to give you a little bit of intuition on what it is to some of those use cases. So in some sense, it's about solving problems that are outside the scope of today's computers. That is why it's so exciting. It's not about making just today's computers faster or better. It's a whole set of new problems that we can then solve.
I think you understand it. That's good. I think we can continue. So if AI today, is a famous comparison, is roughly sort of where the internet was in 1994, what is the first kind of Netflix moment where ordinary people are going to, not Netflix, Netscape moment, where people are going to realize, oh, quantum is here. It's having a real impact on my regular life. Like, when is that coming and what will it be?
I think that's 27, 28, 29, and I'll give you a little bit of a spread. I think there is a small chance, maybe 10% we could do it in 2 years, 30 to 40% chance in maybe 3, and I would give it a high, 70 to 90% that we'll get that moment in 4. And I actually like your analogy of the Netscape moment. So I was in graduate school in engineering in the mid-'80s. We knew the internet was coming. It was obvious. That's how we did all our work. That's what we were working on. But it was impossible to explain it to the public in terms of the impact it would make. But there was the Netscape moment. That was 1995. And Netscape with the browser really put it on everybody's mindset that'll happen. I think for AI, that moment was late 22 with ChatGPT. I think that moment for quantum is about 3 to 4 years away when a quantum computer will do something, and that'll be the moment. When it does something that people wake up and say, wow, we didn't know it could do that, because let's acknowledge, technologists have never overpromised, ever in the history of technology.
Sure.
So a little bit of cynicism, hey, is this 2 years out? Is it 5 years out? Are you in science fiction? I got it, you're talking about here are these challenges and you have a roadmap. So that is why I think people tend to wait till that moment, till you can actually demonstrate something, as opposed to sort of believing a roadmap from the industry.
So in what realm do you think this is going to show up? Because I'd like you to talk a little bit about who your customers are today and why they're getting out in front of it and what sectors. But like, where, if you had to predict, would you say, that is the most likely place people will notice a change in their lives?
Yeah. So we do have about, I'll call it 250. I won't use the word customers. These are more like R&D partnerships where people want to come and see, like, got it, it's not big enough, it's not got enough error correction, so it's a little wrong. You got to solve those challenges. But despite all that, people are saying, let me try. Will the problem I'm really interested in work at a small scale, so it's not got commercial advantage today? Because if it does, then we know that as they get bigger, we will get that commercial advantage, right? So that's kind of where we are. So take a company in Japan like JSR, who does chemicals research. Japan is a massive specialty chemicals manufacturer. They're interested. Or a auto company that's making EVs. They're deeply interested in, could we improve an EV battery? Or a large capital markets company, maybe right here, maybe not very far from here, who's interested in, hey, if I could do better pricing, then not today, because today the problems are, I'll call them cute, but not meaningful. But I can see that if you can get to be 10 times bigger than today, then there's a big advantage. Or an insurance company who says, can I actually use this to do a better competition of risk, which means I can give you better pricing against your insurance policies. You got to look, insurance, that's straightforward, isn't it? Well, think about all the imponderables around climate change and what is happening there. And in commercial insurance, where buildings cost hundreds of millions, not just a few 100,000, then suddenly all those aspects begin to play. So I think that the first two is going to be in materials world, and I'm using the word materials, not life sciences, and in financial risk are going to be, I think, the first two cases. And then immediately, I think we'll see a lot of interest from life sciences. Could you do better medicines? Could you do better molecules? I think about, we have something that maybe is better for penetrating the brain-blood barrier, which means you can carry drugs into the brain better, or maybe better in understanding how proteins unfold. But I do think that's a bit further, because that requires an even more sophisticated quantum computer.
So you mentioned modeling, which is something that I think AI is also getting very good at. I think it'd be helpful if you could sort of disentangle where quantum and AI both interlap and where they don't. So what's something that quantum will do that AI never will be able to do? And what's something AI can do now that quantum just shouldn't bother with?
Yeah. So I think if it's coming down to, let's read all the literature. Let's become aware of what alloys exist. If you go through the literature, you might find 100,000 alloys. AI is going to be much better at interpolating, okay, you got this one, slight differences. Probably if you interpolate between these two, I can get a new one that does it. Wonderful. AI should do that, and AI is going to be far, far better at doing that than quantum. What happens if you now want a strange mixture of 4 or 5 things that have never been touched on in the literature? The chances AI is going to be good at now predicting the properties is really small. the chances that quantum is going to be great at predicting those properties is really high. So it's not completely accurate. So don't take it totally literally, but if it's looking at the past and then learning from the past and extrapolating forward, nothing will beat AI doing that. If it's about trying to discover the future, that's where quantum comes in, because that's kind of the underlying fabric of the universe we live in, is quantum mechanics.
So quick, you mentioned money. Quick questions about money. You spend about $7 billion in R&D, IBM does every year. So what's the percentage, or what's the actual number between quantum and AI? And when should your shareholders expect all of this to turn into unimaginable riches for themselves?
So the analogy I would give you, because you used the Netscape moment, quantum today is where GPUs were in 2015. So GPUs existed, they were well known. Certainly Jensen from NVIDIA kind of knew where they could go. The world didn't really fully understand that, investors didn't. Suddenly in 22 they did. So if I say quantum is kind of where that is, then for investors it's a question of which are the bets they want to place that let them ride that, because riding the GPU wave today is kind of too late. Mm-hmm. Those who began to ride it in 20 and 21 and 19 are the ones who really gained big. That's kind of how tech works. You got to say it's real enough, you can see it coming, maybe not in 2012, but so if I make that the moment. So then you say, well, when will you get the returns and all that? That was the first question you asked. So I kind of put that at 3-4 years out. You're going to begin to see numbers that will be astonishing. These things in the first 5 years, the revenue will grow on a hockey stick. It'll be exponential, meaning it multiplies each year, not just additive.
Okay, so from an investing standpoint, when we see you in a leather jacket, it will be too late?
When you see our investors clapping and rolling around, it's too late.
Okay, got it. So we'll pivot to AI for a minute. You run the company that built Deep Blue and built Watson, and yet IBM is not racing to build the biggest general purpose AI model. So why is your strategy different from OpenAI, from Google, from Microsoft? And talk us through a little bit about when you decided to go in a different direction and why.
Yeah. So it comes down to what's your business model. So we are not a consumer company in any shape or form. I got to put it very simply. If you're a consumer company, it actually behooves you to build the biggest possible model. And I'll say it a little bit tongue-in-cheek. Do you need a model that can summarize your email? Of course. Do you need a model that can maybe compare two legal documents? Of course. But if you're a consumer company, if that same model can also translate Finnish to French, maybe you get another 2 million users. If you can also write a haiku, you get another maybe 60 million users. If you can also write an email in the voice of Steinbeck, you'll get another maybe 10 million users. So for a consumer company...
People love Steinbeck.
You ought to go bigger and bigger and bigger, because it's a few more users all on the same, and that has advantage. If you're a business user, and I say, I need for you to compare two legal documents, you say, sure, I can use that really big model. But could I use a small model that can compare two legal documents, but at 1% of the cost? That's a sheer win for a business company. So we said, okay, let's focus on areas where we can actually show that there is a 100x advantage, equally effective, equally accurate, but it can't do all those other things. And we believe that the cost of inferencing and the cost of models is going to become a really big issue. And by the way, if it's only 1%, that also means it's only 1% of the energy. So there is that big advantage that is going to come. So that is the direction we decided to go. And the moment your model is smaller, you can also easier to put guardrails around it to make sure it doesn't do some other things, which means that hallucination is less likely if you're keeping it in that domain, which a lot of our customers, in our case, over half our customers live in regulated industries, is really important. So that's the direction we are going, but it's because we are largely selling to businesses. We do not sell anything to consumers.
So you've been CEO of IBM for 5 years, right? So you've seen AI transform internal operations, R&D. How is the company using it in ways that are very different from 5 years ago when you started?
So 5 years ago, I think we were in the world of what I would call deep learning, not large language models or LLMs. In deep learning, you take a lot of data, you kind of know what your task is going to be, and you can go train a model, and then immediately you discover, well, when new data comes in, you got to retrain the model. If your task changes slightly, you got to retrain the model. I call that it was sort of bespoke AI. You can do certain things really well, like customer service, but doing it across the enterprise would be just too expensive and too hard. I think that's where AI was till 2020. Now, you can build one LLM, and you can say, oh, it's a pretty easy fine-tune over a weekend, not using a lot of experts, to use it for a task. That unlocks a huge amount of use cases that we can do. So, as an example, could I have it do better procurement? You look at procurement. Well, we have a couple of thousand people who do procurement. We also procure $50 billion a year worth of things. So you kind of care about, is it authentic? Is it correct? Is the pricing correct? Is the invoicing correct? A lot of that is comparing documents. Could we use it to make procurement more effective? Could we use it to get our vendors paid quicker? Because you can now compare all of it, because all of that, in some sense, intuition-wise, let's call it is reading. You got to read a lot of things, and these LLMs are remarkably good at being able to read and compare. So infusing it into what I would call the backbone of how enterprise processes run, I admit it's not what always comes to mind. It's not the most sort of attractive thing, but it is a lot of cost out there. And to give a simple example, so we do a lot of work with the Veterans Administration, an agency that provides healthcare, if I remember, to like 40 million Americans, because veterans get it for their entire life. Could we take benefits enrollment and claims down from the 3-month lag it used to be down to a day or two? Well, that's something that is possible using today's AI. So that's the kind of thing where we think we unlock a lot of value for the nation, for companies, and for governments around.
So given that, and given its incredible productivity, what jobs go away at IBM in the next 24 months and what jobs grow?
Well, so I'll use the last 24 months as an example. Our total employment has stayed stable or slightly grown. That said, has there been a shift from some roles to others? Absolutely. If I look at an example that our CHRO talks about, if I look at human resources, the people who give advice to people on what the team should be, what development is needed, what should you train people on, they are very much going to be needed. I think that's very much an empathetic, very much a human topic. Then there is a transactional side. Make sure somebody gets a raise. If I want a mortgage, I need to get an employment verification letter. Those I call are the transactional side. A lot of that can be automated. So the people who work in those are going to get reduced. But then we do a lot of consulting with our clients to make them able to do that. They can then go into those roles. That's why I'm actually firmly convinced total employment is not going to change, or if anything goes up. Every technology wave you can go backwards has raised total employment because there is more productivity, and the more productive company, at least in business, normally gains market share, and if you gain market share, you increase total employment. You've never seen a company that gains market share reduce total employment. But there is going to be a change that I think that very rote, very clerical levels of jobs are going to see a reduction, but then there is going to be more jobs that require human interface and human interaction and understanding what the other side wants, because that is where there's going to be a lot of value that goes in there.
Let me do something very empirical, which is ask you for a vibe check inside IBM. You are convicted that ultimately things are going to grow, but there will be churn. How are your employees feeling about that?
Well, we survey our employees. Being a tech company, we're a little analytic, a little numerical, a little rigorous about it.
So vibe check is not one of your management goals?
Well, it's a vibe check. So every month we do what we call a little pulse check, which I think samples about 10% of our population. And once a year, we do a thorough, all employees. And normally about 70 to 80% actually respond to it. But that's a lot more thorough. It takes them 30 minutes because we ask them 30 to 40 questions. If I look at it where we are in the top decile of employee engagement. So because we do that to validate how good are we as an employer. So that's kind of where we are. I think people react a lot to, is this giving me new tools? I'll give you a second example of your vibe check. So this summer, for 2 weeks, we told all our people, we'd like you to go out and just play. We're not asking you to do this for making money. Play around with LLMs and see whether it can improve yourself. We do it as a fun competition. Make your team of 10, 20 people so that if you're feeling uncomfortable, bring in some friends who know the skills you don't have and see whether you can do something with LLMs to go improve how you do your job. We had 160,000 people participate in it, like 30,000 different teams. So that gives you a pretty good sense that people are interested in doing it. Invariably, what comes out is, at the end of it, yeah, maybe we'll get a great idea for business, but that's less important. Do they get excited about it to see how it can unlock and make them more productive and more happy, and you lose your fear of it, is what we get. So if we get 2/3 of our people wanting to use it, that's a pretty good vibe check in terms of reaction.
Let's pivot to something much safer, politics. So earlier this month, you attended the AI Education Roundtable and the dinner at the White House. You've met the president?
Not at that particular meeting, but at other times in the same month, yes.
Okay. What's the best question the president has asked you about technology?
Actually, the question he has asked me right all the way back to the beginning of the year is, how can technology really improve the effectiveness of the federal government in providing better services to our citizens? That's the question he has asked. And he's on, and why is it so hard? Why does it take so long? Can you do it in a year or two as opposed to 4 years? I encourage you strongly, go work with the agencies who want to work with you. Can you help how Social Security gets delivered? Can you help reduce some of the fraud that happens? And here I'm not on the political word, so don't politicize it. There is fraud. Fraud's going to happen. By the way, I just look at it very literally. If you dial it such that you get no fraud, then it's very inconvenient and very hard. If you dial it so that it's really, really simple, you are going to get fraud, right? I mean, like the estimates on the COVID, PPP, and all that is like $200-300 billion of fraud. I can tell you, there were 5 loans taken for IBM as a small business in a county in California in my name, and that was a dialing in because we were trying to make it really easy. So can we use technology to really try to arrive at a Goldilocks? Simple enough, but cut down massively on that. Those are the kinds of questions that he has been asking, and he really encourages us to go work with the agencies to go get that done. I do react very well to that. I think that that's a great place for us to be.
The administration recently took a 10% stake in Intel. If they called and said, we'd like 10% of IBM, what would you say?
Look, it depends. People react as if this is something new. Go back to the 2008 global financial crisis. What did the administrations at those times do to bail out AIG, to get into Citi, to get into American Express? They took stakes. It's, to me, as a business person, it's very simple. If you're getting a lump of money from somebody, it can take 3 forms. Is it an outright grant? I think taxpayers would get reactive to why you're helping bail out a business with no return. Mm-hmm. Is it debt that you're going to pay it back? Or do you want, if somebody's bailing you out, do you want to say that they can get a return? So it's risky. They could go bankrupt. In this case, there's no return. But if they do well, you get a 2x return. It's not just debt. I think it's a fair question to ask which thing falls into each of those 3 buckets. Outright grant with no return, debt, meaning you pay it back but with some appropriate interest rate, or is it equity? There's pluses and minuses in all 3. I kind of look at it, I'm sorry, maybe too logically as opposed to emotionally.
You are entitled to your logical position. So speaking of that, I want to wrap up. You're an engineer who became CEO. You're the first engineer at IBM in a long time. I work with a lot of engineers. You work with a lot of engineers. I'm not sure if the audience does. But what's one incredibly annoying habit from engineering that you have brought to the corner office and that you simply refuse to give up and everybody's going to have to adjust around it?
I like to read more than perhaps have very long conversations. So I don't want people coming and pitching me on all the stuff that they want to come and pitch, because I call that education. So I say, give me something to read. Now we'll discuss it when you come in. And a lot of people, I think, it may be intimidating for some people because now you have to know your material really well. You cannot live off your script. You have to actually have that discussion and not just be scripted, because it's easy when you're reading a white paper or a presentation to just go through your 10 charts.
So you're saying that subscribing to printed matter is something that makes you much smarter?
I probably, both printed and online, I spend a good 1 to 2 hours a day going through it. I have my list of 30 different outlets that I will scan and read.
And on that list, are there like one or two that you're just like, oh, that's the...
Well, so to answer you bluntly, Atlantic is definitely on that list.
Oh, that's great.
And so are many others.
That's wonderful. All right, we are out of time. This has been delightful. By the way, every interview today ends this way with an upsell. But thank you so much. This has been great.
Thank you. Thank you.